Hello, my friend. Welcome to your sleep story. My name is Stephen Dalton. I'm an Irish storyteller, and it's my great privilege to be the voice that you listen to as you go to sleep tonight. Tonight, I begin a new series, Night Stories, where we look at people and their lives from a more narrative perspective. I tell the story in my usual sleepy way, but it's more like an audiobook reading, and you follow the journey of a particular character. Tonight we start with a banker in Japan named Naoki, who moves from his city life in Tokyo to a much more peaceful life, and we follow that journey. One small thing, I love to know more about you. Where are you in the world? And what time is it while you're listening? Let me know in the comments. Okay, let's do the relaxation session now, which will take until 10 minutes into the video. I'm going to count down from 10 to 1, and as I do, allow yourself to let go more and more. 10. Feel the support of the bed beneath you, or the floor, or whatever you lie upon tonight. And as you become aware of that support, see if you can become aware of a deeper support, a constant support, the support of the earth, our home, beneath everything, and allow that awareness to enable you to let go, to release, to begin to say goodbye to the day. And if your eyes aren't closed yet, maybe now is a good time to allow them to close. 9. You are safe. Allow my voice to be a friend tonight, to be a guide of kindness, a guide that you can trust, to only ever bring you to safe places in this story or another one. And becoming aware more and more now of that feeling of safety. See if it enables you to let go. Eight. The day is done. Whatever has been, has been. Whatever will be, will be. You are probably still having thoughts arriving in your head, in your mind, and instead of following them, see if you can just observe them and watch them go. Don't fight them. Watch them float away like leaves on a moonlit river, or clouds passing by through a starlit sky. 7. This is your time. You deserve this time. Allow yourself to luxuriate in that fact. Allow yourself to settle into this time now. Know that you deserve rest. We all do. And become aware of your body, where you might be holding tension. Maybe it's in your feet. Maybe it's in your lower legs. Maybe it's in your belly or your hands. Or maybe you're like me and you hold the tension in your face. Just let it all go now. 6. Peace lives within you. I promise you it does. And you can find it tonight. Just begin to let go now. And see, can you find that peace within you? It is there, waiting to be seen, waiting to be heard, waiting to be felt. 5. As you move closer and closer towards deep rest, know that you have nothing to carry right now, nowhere to go, nothing to do, and allow that fact to bring about more rest within you. 4. Perhaps allow a little gratitude now. Gratitude for the simple things, for the shelter you have tonight, for the breath in your body, for the ones you love. 3. Begin to engage with your imagination now. Begin to see a rainy Tokyo night and begin to see a bus traveling through that night, and begin to feel the atmosphere of that bus, a cozy nighttime traveling atmosphere in this place far away from all that you know. 2. Checking in with your body one more time now. Your body has worked hard for you today. It's time to give it rest. And 1. Completely letting go now. As I tell you tonight's sleep story. Tokyo was a blur of light and rain. Neon signs blinked through the mist like quiet thoughts trying to reach the surface. Umbrellas swayed in unison along Shinjuku station, overlapping like a sea of petals under the downpour. The city moved with its usual urgency, the screech of taxis, the distant hum of an overhead train, a voice echoing from a loudspeaker in practiced monotone. But Naoki stood still. He adjusted the strap of his bag and tightened the collar of his coat. His black umbrella tilted slightly in the wind, droplets sliding down its edge in tiny shimmering trails. He was soaked at the cuffs, and his glasses had fogged a little, but he didn't mind. This would be the last rainy Tokyo night he'd see for a long time. The night bus to Kagoshima, the first leg of his journey southward, pulled into the station with a soft, mechanical sigh. Headlights cut through the drizzle. The driver stepped down and greeted the waiting passengers with a calm smile, bowing once before ushering them gently aboard. Naoki stepped onto the bus. Inside, it was immediately different, warmer, dim. The soundscape softened. No horns, no train announcements, just the low hum of the engine and the soft rustle of coats and bags being settled. The overhead lights glowed like paper lanterns, casting a quiet warmth across the cabin. He found his seat near the back, next to the window. No one sat beside him, a small mercy. He removed his coat carefully and folded it over his lap, his small suitcase tucked beneath his seat. In its front pocket were a few books, a worn journal, and a single postcard with a watercolor painting of Okinawa's coastline, cliffs, turquoise sea, and little houses tucked into the hills like secrets. He rested his head against the window pane. Cool glass. Outside, the city lights blurred with rain, tall buildings gliding past in streaks of gold and red. And for the first time in months, he let his shoulders fall. No more deadlines, no more marble lobbies, elevator pitches, endless financial forecasts. He'd left his job just 3 days ago, slipping his resignation letter into his manager's inbox before the sun had even risen. He hadn't told many people about his plan, just a few close friends, and even then, vaguely. I need a break. I'm going south for a while. Maybe I'll start something small. The truth felt too sacred for explanation. He wasn't running. He was unplugging. From Tokyo. From expectation. From the version of himself who had always known the answer, but never asked the question. A soft chime signaled departure. The bus eased forward, gliding through the quiet streets, Rain tapped a gentle rhythm on the roof, blending into the soft breathing of fellow passengers. Naoki turned his face toward the window. He passed familiar places, an old bookstore, a convenience store that had always left its lantern lit, the quiet cafe where he used to sit late at night with a cup of matcha and a spreadsheet. Everything looked a little softer in the rain, a little kinder. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small packet of sakura-scented hand wipes, a farewell gift from a co-worker who had once said, "When you go, take the peaceful version of Tokyo with you." Naoki smiled faintly, unwrapped the packet, and placed it gently in the side pouch of his bag. He didn't need much for this trip, just the quiet, the road, and a belief, growing slowly now, like a seed cracked open in the dark, that there was a life waiting for him, not one to chase, but one to arrive at. The engine hummed, the lights dimmed slightly, rain whispered along the windows, and the Nightbus rolled on, carrying him out of the city and into the warmth of something new. Hours had passed. Naoki wasn't sure how many. The night had stretched and folded in on itself, a gentle, uninterrupted drift. The bus had left Tokyo far behind, traded towers for shadows, neon for silence. Now, they were tracing the edge of the sea. It was just visible through the window, a dark, reflective sheet under the soft glow of moonlight and rain. The road curved beside it like a lazy river, hugging the coastline. On one side, the mountains, still and vast. On the other, the ocean, calm and endless. The rain had eased to a gentle mist. Naoki sat still, watching the roadside lamps pass, one by one, like measured breaths. He was wrapped now in a soft wool blanket provided by the bus company. There had been a small compartment above the seats, labelled "For Comfort," and when he opened it earlier, he found not only the blanket, but also a lavender-scented eye mask and a tiny bottle of warm barley tea, a detail that struck him, kindness in the quietest form. He sipped the tea slowly. Its nutty warmth settled in his chest. A few seats ahead, someone was quietly humming, barely audible, but there. And across the aisle, an elderly woman with silver-streaked hair, had fallen asleep with a book resting gently on her chest. Naoki glanced at the title, Okinawa, Islands of Quiet Strength. He looked out the window again. The ocean shimmered beneath the soft spill of stars. Somewhere out there, beyond that water, was where he was going. Okinawa. He knew only fragments about it, stories he'd gathered like stones in his pocket. He knew it was warm year-round, kissed by sea breezes and the scent of salt and hibiscus, that the people there believed in Yuimaru, the deep sense of connection and mutual support. He'd read that the elders there lived longer than anywhere else, not because of perfection, but because of slowness, because of rhythm, because of joy shared quietly in gardens and at evening tables. He didn't know exactly where he would live, but he had seen a listing, a wooden house near the sea, with old floorboards and a small yard. He pictured it now, not perfectly, but with a kind of softness. A bookshelf by the window, a kettle always ready, a small table for guests, or maybe for no one at all. He hadn't played music in years, but lately he'd been thinking of learning the sanshin, the Okinawan 3-stringed instrument. Something simple, something with soul. A soft, crinkling sound interrupted his thoughts. The elderly woman was now awake, eyes gentle behind her glasses. She smiled at him, a slow, knowing kind of smile, and reached into her cloth bag. She pulled out a pair of small, bright tangerines, still with a leaf attached. She held one out to him without a word. Naoki blinked, then accepted it with a slight bow. "Thank you." She smiled again and spoke softly. "They're sweeter in the south." He nodded, but said nothing more. They sat in a comfortable silence. He peeled the tangerine slowly, the scent of citrus rising like sunlight. The flesh was soft, the flavor bright, and yes, maybe even sweeter than any he remembered. With sticky fingers and a heart that felt a little less heavy, Naoki leaned back once more. The coastal road kept winding. The ocean kept breathing. And inside the Nightbus, the warmth held him, like a blanket you don't realize you need it until it's already around your shoulders. The night deepened. Outside, the coastal lights had thinned to almost nothing. The last fishing village long behind them. Now, only the soft whisper of trees and the sea followed the winding road. The bus seemed to float through the dark, a quiet vessel carrying sleeping souls toward the edge of morning. Naoki pulled the blanket higher up to his chest. The tangerine peel still rested in a folded paper napkin on his tray. Its sweetness lingered in his mouth. Its brightness somehow echoing in his chest. The warmth of the barley tea had faded, but not the comfort. There was mist on the windows, and the steady hum of tires gliding over wet roads. Naoki's eyelids grew heavy. His breath deepened, and soon he surrendered to sleep. The dream came softly. He was a boy again, maybe 10 or 11, running barefoot along the stone edge of a riverbank near his childhood home. The sky was a deep summer blue, cicadas humming. He could feel the sun on his arms, his legs soaked up to the knees from chasing minnows in the shallows. A bamboo flute rested in the grass nearby. He picked it up and played a few off-key notes, but they made him laugh. A kind of free, unguarded laughter he hadn't felt in years. He was not chasing time here, not trying to earn a moment of rest. He was inside it. The dream shifted. He stood now at the edge of a cliff overlooking the sea. The water below was a brilliant turquoise, the sky soft with morning. Before him stood a small wooden house, weathered, beautiful in its simplicity. White curtains danced in the open windows. Inside, bookshelves, light wood, ceramic teacups lined in a row. A single desk with a worn cushion. A kettle steaming quietly in the corner. He stepped through the doorway and knew, without knowing how, that this was his place. Not owned, not conquered, just belonging. His hand brushed the spine of a book with faded Japanese script. His breath slowed. Outside the window, he saw people walking along a beach path. A child laughing, a man with a fishing pole, a woman holding a bunch of herbs freshly picked. Someone passed him a steaming bowl of rice and pickled vegetables. No one asked who he was. They just smiled and said, "You're just in time for breakfast." The dream softened again. Now it was night time, and he was seated at a low table beneath paper lanterns. A few neighbors gathered around. Someone strummed a sanshin, its gentle 3-string rhythm weaving through laughter and the clinking of chopsticks. Naoki held a teacup in both hands. The warmth of it anchored him, steady and real. He looked up at the night sky. It was full of stars, bright and close, and he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not excitement, not pride, just ease. He woke slowly, eyelids fluttering as the edges of the dream faded into the grey light of early dawn. The world was still wrapped in a sleepy hush. A few passengers shifted in their seats. The old woman beside him had returned to her book. Someone coughed gently toward the front. The ocean was still beside them, pale now, touched with the first light of morning. Naoki sat quietly for a long time, not moving. He wasn't sure where the dream had come from, whether it was memory or imagination, or something already waiting for him. But something inside him had shifted. A kind of permission had been granted to start over, to arrive somewhere new, to be someone softer. And as the road continued south, winding toward Kagoshima and the sea beyond it, Naoki felt the weight of who he'd been begin to settle, and who he was becoming begin to rise, like mist lifting from the coast. The rain had faded into a fine mist by the time the bus coasted into Kagoshima. It was still early, just past 6, and the city was still yawning awake. The streets were quiet, the air thick with sea salt and steam from nearby hot springs. In the distance, Sakurajima, the active volcano, loomed behind a veil of cloud, its shape ghostly against the pale morning sky. The driver made a quiet announcement. "Short rest stop. Ferry to Naha departs afternoon." Naoki stepped off the bus, stretching his limbs gently, feeling the stiffness of a long night soften in the humid air. The breeze carried with it the scent of wet earth, morning dew. and the faint sweetness of baked bread from a nearby market stall just setting up. He pulled his coat tighter around himself, though it wasn't cold, just unfamiliar. The rain-slicked pavement gleamed under street lights that were beginning to blink off one by one. He walked slowly, letting the silence of Kagoshima wrap around him like the morning mist. A slow city, sleepy, and somehow comforting. A port town, always half in motion. He found a bench near the waterfront, sheltered beneath a camphor tree whose wide branches still dripped gently with rain. A group of workers nearby were loading crates onto a small delivery boat. Birds called lazily overhead. Somewhere behind him, a vending machine sang a little melody as it dispensed a can of hot tea. He closed his eyes for a moment. The weight of the journey so far settled in his shoulders. Not heavy, but present. How long had it been since he'd sat still like this, with nowhere to be, no expectation pressing against his skin? He pulled his journal from his bag and flipped to a blank page. For a moment, he simply looked at it. Then, in small, steady handwriting, he wrote, "There is a kind of stillness I have never known before, and I think it's the beginning of healing." He underlined the word healing once, then folded the journal shut. As he stood, he noticed an older man seated nearby on a folding stool, his hat tilted low, smoking a pipe and watching the boats. Their eyes met briefly, and the man gave a small nod. "First time to Okinawa?" he asked, voice gravel soft but kind. Naoki nodded. The man smiled, tapping ash into a small tin. "It's not just a place, it's a different way of living." "I've heard that," Naoki said. "I'm going to start a quieter life there. That's the hope, anyway." The man considered this for a moment, then replied, "The sea doesn't rush. Neither should we." Naoki smiled faintly. A silence passed between them, the kind that didn't need filling, just breathing. Eventually, the man said, "The ferry is long, but peaceful. Sit on the upper deck if the weather holds. You'll see flying fish." "I will," Naoki promised. They nodded once more in quiet farewell, and Naoki turned back toward the ferry terminal. Inside, it was all gentle echoes and soft announcements. He collected his ticket, took a seat by the window, and sipped the hot tea he'd bought from the machine. Outside, the ferry waited, its white hull rising steady in the harbour. Naoki watched as it rocked gently against the pier, the ropes tethering it like a sleeping creature waiting to stir. The sky had lightened to a soft pearl grey, and a few rays of sun broke through the clouds like hope peeking through a cracked door. His heart was calm, not bracing, just ready. The sea was waiting, and beyond it, Okinawa. The ferry eased away from the dock with a low groan and a burst of white foam, slipping gently into the open sea. Naoki stood on the upper deck, his coat zipped to the neck, the breeze tugging softly at his sleeves. The last rooftops of Kagoshima grew smaller behind them, blurring into mist and memory. Before him stretched the wide, endless ocean. It wasn't stormy, not this time, just calm, endless grey blue, gentle waves like long exhalations, rising and falling with the slow breath of the earth. He leaned on the rail. The motion of the ferry wasn't unsettling. It was grounding, rocking slightly, a rhythm he didn't have to control. He let himself sway with it. Every bit of tension gently pulled from his shoulders and cast adrift into the sea. He'd brought a small book with him, an anthology of Okinawan folk tales, but he didn't open it. Not yet. The sea was story enough. A voice passed behind him. The ferry steward, offering a quiet welcome and pointing out the snack bar below. There were rice balls, hot soup, and jasmine tea. He nodded in thanks, though he wasn't hungry yet. For now he only wanted to look out. Clouds above rolled in soft stacks, thick and slow-moving. The air had changed. No longer the edge of winter crispness of Tokyo, but something milder, humid, almost sweet. He inhaled deeply. Salt, a trace of hibiscus, carried from some distant shore. He remembered something he'd once read. In Okinawa, they don't chase time. They walk beside it, like an old friend. He pulled out his phone and opened a photo he'd saved long ago. A small wooden house with white shutters, sea in the background, laundry dancing gently on a line. It was a rental listing he'd seen months ago. He didn't know if it was still available, but it had sparked something in him. Not ambition, but longing for stillness, for sun-warmed wood underfoot, for silence without loneliness. Below, a child laughed, a sudden burst of joy, followed by the high voice of a mother, gently reminding him to be careful. Naoki smiled to himself. The deck swayed again. Not violently, just enough to remind him of the movement, the crossing, how far he'd come. At the bow, a small group of flying fish burst from the surface, a flash of silver above the water, like stars skipping across the sea. He followed their path with his eyes until they vanished. Everything, he thought, was gently opening. The sky, the sea, and somewhere inside him, himself. Later, he sat at a table near a window below deck. The tea was hot and fragrant, the miso soup simple, grounding. He ate slowly. He thought of the emails he no longer had to answer, the suits folded neatly at the bottom of his suitcase, not because he needed them, but because he hadn't quite known what to do with them yet. The city he'd left, the expectations he'd peeled away one at a time, like heavy layers. And he thought of Okinawa, still ahead, but close now. A place with its own pace, its own seasons, its own music. He didn't know what he'd do yet. Not exactly. He only knew what he wouldn't do anymore. And that was enough. The ferry rocked gently as the announcement came over the speaker. Soft, calm, musical. Arrival at Naha in 30 minutes. Please prepare your belongings. Naoki gathered his bag. The window beside him was fogged with sea mist. Beyond it, he could just make out the shoreline. Green hills, red-roofed homes, the silver curve of a quiet beach. And the thought came to him, simple, quiet, full of truth. I want to live gently, like this place. The ferry touched dock with a slow exhale. Ropes pulled taut, the engine quieting like a sigh at the end of a long sentence. Naoki stepped off with his bag slung over one shoulder, and the salty wind already brushing against his face, warmer than he'd expected, softer. The sky over Naha was pale and wide, filled with light cloud cover, the rain long gone, but its freshness still lingering in the air. The sun was beginning to return, filtered through moisture like gold behind rice paper. He paused at the edge of the pier, suitcase in hand, and let the moment land. The ground felt different here, not just drier or softer, but slower, as if the very tempo of the earth beneath him had shifted. Birds called from somewhere in the palm trees. A cat stretched lazily on a crate beside a shuttered fruit stand. A line of mopeds hummed past, their drivers in flip-flops and printed shirts, moving without rush or urgency. Naoki smiled, not at anything in particular, but because his body seemed to understand something his mind was still catching up to. He had arrived. He made his way through the small port terminal, past wooden signs painted in cheerful blues and reds. Outside, a cluster of taxis waited, their drivers chatting with one another under parasols. He gave one the name of the guest house, and was soon gliding through the streets of Naha, narrow, shaded, with bursts of colour everywhere. A mural of sea turtles on a concrete wall, bougainvillea spilling over the balconies, a grandmother sweeping leaves from her storefront, humming softly to herself. The buildings were low and wide, painted in sun-washed tones, faded pinks, yellows, turquoise. Naoki watched it all pass like pages in a picture book. The guest house was nestled on a quiet street just 10 minutes from the sea. A modest 2-story home with white shutters, a tiled roof, and ivy curling around its fence. The owner, a woman named Sayuri-san, in her early 60s, met him at the gate with a quiet nod and a smile. "You must be tired," she said, leading him inside. "Would you like tea first, or sleep?" He laughed softly. "Tea would be perfect." Inside, the air smelled of tatami and citrus. The floor creaked in a comforting way, like it was greeting his footsteps. The living area was simple, woven mats, low cushions, a small table with a ceramic vase of wildflowers. through the open windows, a soft breeze carried in the sound of distant waves. She brought him a cup of jasmine tea and a small plate of mochi. The tea was floral and clean, the perfect contrast to the sea air. He wrapped his hands around the warm cup and felt the last tension of the journey fall away. They spoke briefly, where he was from, what he hoped to find here. She didn't ask too much, only smiled and said, "Many people come to Okinawa for rest. Some of them stay longer than they planned." He understood. After finishing his tea, she showed him to his room. A small upstairs space with a low bed, white curtains, and a bamboo chair by the window. From the balcony, he could see the ocean, just a narrow strip of blue between the rooftops, but enough. Enough to know he'd be at the shore soon. He unpacked slowly, not just things, but emotions. Laid the suits carefully in the wardrobe, unsure if he'd ever wear them again. Placed his books on the low shelf, each one a thread of memory, and set his journal on the windowsill. It caught the light, as if it had found its place. As night began to fall, Naoki walked to the beach. The sand was pale and smooth beneath his shoes. He took them off. The water kissed his feet with a warmth he'd never known before, a softness that held no judgment, only invitation. There were no loud voices, no ringing phones, just the sea, the breeze, and his own breath, steady, present, alive. He didn't stay long, just long enough to know tomorrow he would swim, tomorrow he would rest, tomorrow he would begin. The sunlight arrived gently, without fanfare. It slipped between the white curtains, warmed the bamboo floors, and brushed against the side of Naoki's face as he lay still under a light cotton sheet. For the first time in a long while, he had no alarm, no meeting, no obligations shaped by urgency. Just the soft chorus of morning sounds, birds calling from tiled rooftops, a neighbor sweeping leaves along the sidewalk, the low hum of someone cycling past on an old silver bike. Naoki rose slowly, wrapped in the quiet. The guest house was peaceful. A faint clinking from the kitchen below suggested Sayori-san was preparing breakfast for someone. The rustle of plates, a kettle's low whistle. He changed into a simple linen shirt and swim shorts, tucked a small towel under his arm, and stepped out into the golden morning. The air was warm, but not heavy, fresh, like the first page of a book. He walked barefoot down the path that led to the beach. The street smelled of salt and hibiscus. A white dog snoozed beneath the shade of a potted plant. Someone had hung wind chimes in a window, and they played softly in the breeze, like distant piano keys, scattered and slow. At the shore, the sand was still cool, kissed by the receding tide. Naoki stood for a moment, letting the sight hold him. The water was clear and calm, a blue so gentle it felt almost impossible. Pale fish darted near the surface. The horizon stretched endlessly, stitched to the sky with light. He stepped into the sea, first ankles, then knees, then waist. The water welcomed him, warm, silken, almost still. He floated, just that. The sky above him, soft and endless. The water cradling him like a lullaby without words. He closed his eyes and let go. Later, he sat at a shaded bench near the beach, sipping pineapple juice from a tall glass handed to him by a smiling vendor in a red cap. The juice was tangy and bright, the ice clinking softly as it melted. For lunch, he found a market stall that sold Goya champuru, a local dish of bitter melon stir-fried with tofu and egg. The woman who served it had kind eyes and a voice that reminded him of lullabies. She told him gently, "If you eat Goya often, you'll never age." He smiled and took her word for it. The flavor was strong and earthy, unlike anything he was used to, but it made him feel present, grounded, like he was already part of the island, if only in a small way. In the afternoon, he wandered without aim. The streets were narrow and shaded, dotted with pottery shops, quiet temples, and tiny gardens spilling over stone walls. He passed a bookstore tucked into a quiet corner, its doorway hung with a fading blue Norran curtain. Inside, wooden shelves, stacks of old magazines, and a cat curled up beneath the counter. He spent nearly an hour there, thumbing through pages. He found a thin, hand-stitched book on Okinawan tea rituals, its pages soft, its illustrations delicate. He purchased it with exact change. The woman behind the counter wrapped it in tissue paper and tied it with twine. No barcode, no receipt, just a bow and a smile that said, "You're welcome to return any time." As the light began to soften, he returned to the guest house. He sat on the balcony for a while, the new book on his lap, the ocean visible beyond the rooftops, glittering with the golden touch of late afternoon. Naoki sipped jasmine tea, the same kind Sayuri-san had welcomed him with, and for a while he did nothing but breathe. No checking the clock, no planning ahead, no guilt for simply existing. Just the feeling of air in his lungs, the slow melt of sunlight, the knowledge that nothing was being asked of him except to be here, now. Evening came slowly, as if the island itself didn't want to let go of the light. The air grew cooler, the sky tinted with soft pastels, dusty pinks, streaks of lavender, a golden haze brushing the tops of the rooftops. Lamps began to flicker on, one by one, casting warm pools of light on the sidewalks. Crickets began to sing from hidden places in the garden. Naoki stood barefoot on the balcony of his guest house, watching it all. The world wasn't rushing here, and for the first time in many years, neither was he. On the small table beside him sat his notebook, opened to a fresh page. A pen lay across it, waiting, and next to it, a thin ceramic cup of jasmine tea, steam curling gently upward into the twilight. He sat down, drew the notebook into his lap, and began to write. I've arrived, not just in a place, but in myself. There is quiet here, and inside the quiet, something is growing. Not ambition, not urgency, just belonging. He closed the notebook. The idea for the shop had returned, not like a plan, but like a whisper. A little wooden house near the beach, a space with books on every shelf, and teapots warming on low burners. People coming in from the rain or the heat, greeted by a wind chime, and the soft scent of roasted barley. He could see it. He could feel it. not as something to chase, but as something already waiting for him to arrive. He would call it Hibi, meaning days, or the quiet rhythm of daily life. It wouldn't need to be perfect, just real, just peaceful, just a place where people could sit down and feel their shoulders fall. Later, as night settled in, he made one final walk, back down to the beach. The moon had risen, casting a silver glow over the water. The sand was cool now, and the tide had crept higher. The sound of the waves was slower than before, softer. He stepped close to the shore and let the ocean wash over his toes. No thoughts of where he had been. No need to figure out what came next. Only this moment, this breath, this sea. He closed his eyes and let the breeze move through him like a melody. When he opened them again, he saw a child running ahead of their mother down the beach, laughing. Small feet kicking up soft plumes of sand, arms outstretched like wings. Naoki watched, smiling, a quiet fullness rising in his chest. He thought of his old life in Tokyo, the narrowness of the schedule, the constant noise. He honored it, but he didn't miss it, not in this moment. And he thought of the people he'd met on the journey, the old woman with the tangerines, the man on the ferry, Sayuri-san with her jasmine tea. Their voices lived inside him now. Kindness in pieces, gentle markers along the road. He turned toward the sea one last time, let his breath slow. Let the night hold him. And as he stood there, feet buried in sand, heart open to the sky, a simple thought settled in his mind like a shell resting gently on the shore. I don't need to rush to become anything. I've already begun.